Thank you, Michael. Now, Vittorio.
Hi. Actually, I am going to tell you something that comes from a patchwork of different experience, because as Applix, we have worked now with over a dozen different publishers, and we have basically got, I think, a distilled edition of what we think works in this particular field. I would like to start quoting Karl Marx, saying that there was a ghost wandering through Europe a couple of years ago, and this ghost was a chart by Morgan Stanley that showed how more time was spent on internet, how the money spent on internet was not commensurate to the amount of time that was spent on it. And as publishers, I was a publisher at the time, we all hoped that at a certain magical point, a great realignment would occur, and the money would follow the time spent. And unhappily, we came in for a surprise. The surprise is that the time we spend on the internet has multiplied even beyond what we expected before, but the money has not. Why did that happen? Because maybe we're looking at the wrong dimension. It is true that time spent on the internet is booming, because you can see, even in your own experience, that with new connected mobile devices and a new connected life, the time we spend looking at news, looking at content, looking at entertainment has multiplied radically. The only problem is the kind of attention we pay to it, and the kind of, let's say, let's go back to your analogy of the church. So the kind of, let's say, metaphysical attention we pay to the media consumption has changed radically. Before, we would stop and watch TV. We would actually do the act of turning it on and sit down, or we would sit down on the couch and open the magazine. Now it's a simple glance on a mobile phone, which is always on, always with us. It's a small measure of time and a small measure of attention. As a result, we have multiplied the inventory, and we've made a buyer's market, because anybody who wants to pay for that inventory has 1 million more minutes of time every month, and 1 million more people trying to sell that time every month, because we should also not forget that we're no longer the only ones selling these times. There is also a whole lot of platforms, Facebook, or curated platforms, or other kinds of social platforms, all selling time, all selling our content, a filter to our content, and competing with us for who sells that. So we were expecting time would have done us justice, but time really hasn't done us justice in this term. Actually, it has put down the value of our inventory. At that point, we found a new competitive pressure from platforms, and I'm not talking about the traditional people we talk about, with like Google or Facebook, but also other platforms such as curation platform, Flipboard, or other platforms like that, and even the automated buying that we all know. It's a very efficient method of pushing unit price down for our media, time and bulk product. So at the end, we are forced to try to sell something else. And this is what we have found common, a thread through all the publishers we've helped. They try to sell something different than bulk and time. This thing, we call it relevance, but it's a term. I will now give you a little idea of what I expect this to be. We have two things that I like for you to take away from this particular chart. The first thing is, when you look at content production, everybody immediately goes with his mind to the idea of content cost reduction. That is the wrong way to think about it. Cost is a dimension relative to the revenues you can get from that content. There will be times when you will have to spend a lot of money for content, because you know that will make you a lot of money. And there will be times when you want to compress to the minimum the amount of money you spend for that particular content, because that will not make you money. So, first of all, let's never look at cost in a different picture than revenues. Second thing, cost has several aspects to it. I've listed a few of them, but let's not forget it. Sure, you have the talent, but you're also paying for the platform, you're paying for the visibility, you're paying for all the brand investment you're doing, and you're paying quite often for the distribution channels. So is it a social, is it a mobile? Anyway, so you end up paying. On the other hand, when you look at the content, don't ask just a simple straight-out question, how much money can I make from it? But ask several questions. The first one is usage. How much has this bit of content have been used? The second thing is it malleable? Can I use this content on several different contexts? I'll give you an example. I can have an article with a picture. There can be a photo gallery. There can be a list. There can be an e-single. There can be an e-book. So the single molecule of content I produced can be manipulated into several contexts of content. It can be, as I said before, photo gallery, a single article, an e-book, a magazine, an advertorial, a piece of native advertisement, something that works together with native advertising. So to measure the malleability, the ability to manipulate the content, is a fundamental dimension when you think about content production in an industrial way. The third thing is the distribution. How easy it is for me to take this molecule of content and distribute it. Do I have to spend extra money to distribute it on a mobile? Do I have to spend extra money to distribute it on a YouTube channel? Is it already optimized for being used and distributed and worked over on several different channels at the same time? And the fourth is obviously monetization. How and when and how good is this piece of content at being monetized? Can I monetize it just now, or is it something that will last long enough and be malleable long enough that I can monetize it over and over and over in the course of time, or does it end now? Most of the content that you see, look at the internet get their best traction not the day they're published, but later on. Most of the content that you see are having huge success are usually content that are referred to in times later than their publication. So you can have a piece of content that will give you €5 today, but will continue to give you €5 every day for the next 3 months. So your ability has to be in being able to maintain this ability to measure both sides of the content production business and measure them together. As an example, and I'm getting to this, the first thing you should do is really define what is a successful content production exercise for you. What are the thresholds, the target in each of these 3 different sets of data that you're setting for your content production. And I have a phrase down here, which is the house of card paradigm. This is the example that I think best explains to it. When Netflix was called to do a production, they sat down, and the first thing was saying, okay, we're doing a production, but it's mainly a web production. So let's use the traditional web attitude to production. Let's do something quick and dirty and really edgy. But they have such extensive data about the taste and the desires of their viewers because of the history and the complex and long series of content acquisition that these people did, that they figured out that they had 3 different levels at which they could produce. If they produce something quick and dirty like internet, on the 4 categories that I showed you before, they would have a return of 7. If they spent a little more, they would have a return of 9. And if they spend a real big amount of money, they would have a return of 12. So they chose to spend an enormous amount of money. House of Cards, I don't know if you have seen it, it's a series it's a TV series with Kevin Spacey, was the most expensive TV project of all American television last year, but was also the most successful because their idea of scientific data production, of scientific content production, said that it was better for them to spend more because they would return much more. If they had made a cheaper product, the return would have been much less. So this, I think, underscores strongly the fact that if you set the target right, and if you have the measuring elements right, it's not automatic that the best solution is to spend less, but quite often it is automatic, it is a discovery that your solution might be to actually spend more on that particular piece of content because the return, the length, the malleability, and the ability to monetize will be better. There are different dimensions of costs, as I said before, but what I like to stress is something very close to what you said before, that is the system impacts on your cost much more than the people. If you have a system that allows you to produce, as we said before, with knowledge of data, with the ability to work over, to manipulate, to reuse, to reconnect the content, you will find out that the impact of your people cost, of your talent cost, will go down. On the other hand, if you have the best talent in the world, but your system is monolithic, does not allow you to reuse the content, does not allow you to manipulate the content, does not allow you to keep track of how the content is doing, you'll end up spending too much money. You look at each other, and then the only solution would be to draw a line and cut people. But that exercise will not be enough. The exercise has to be to put on a system that allows you to look at the dimensions of cost, dimensions of relevance, of return, and have constantly the monitoring of how the particular piece of content is performing and the ability to readjust. If your system does this, the percentage of, let's say, the heaviness of the human cost will look much less daunting than it does otherwise. And to be honest, the most important thing that we have to understand is that as content producer, as entertainment producer, as news producer, we no longer make money because there is scarcity. There is not a finite space in the kiosk. There is not a finite amount of paper, or a finite amount of money available for printing and pressing. This is a world of abundance. There is no more scarcity. And in a world of abundance, we're also not just competing with each other and with the new startup that comes every day in our field, but we're also competing with everybody who is basically filtering us, bringing us people, or taking people away from us in the different areas. So Facebook, when they show an article from us, sure, they're giving us a service, they are bringing people to us, but at the same time, they want to tell that particular person that the most important thing about that act of consumption of media or entertainment that he's doing is the fact that it's filtered through Facebook. There is a fight for relevance between us and the platform where we must use them, but we must use them understanding that we are competing for the relevance in the mind of our customer. And if I know my audience, so if the data gathering exercise I have works well, then I will be able to intercept and capture his or her particular interest much better. And in that fight for relevance, I might be more successful than a platform. But relevance, so, is no longer just a category of mind. So is my content good, is my content bad? Relevance is a very concrete, analytical, economic category. It's a category we can measure precisely. And it's the category we are selling to advertisers and to customers. So, to finish my presentation, two things I'd like for you to take out of this speech. First of all, look at the content as a molecule which has a cost but has several dimensions of return. These several dimensions of return are what I call relevance, and this needs to be set by you, by the publisher, at the beginning of the exercise. You want to reach your targets on those different elements, and you want to reach them especially regarding the system with malleability and distribution. Second thing is you need to read data, you need to adjust continuously, so your system has to let you change the context of the content continuously. And the last thing is the barriers to try new stuff or to cancel bad stuff has to be minimal. You must have a no legacy system. If something works, push it. If something doesn't work, kill it. And to push and kill has to be just as easy as to produce it. Otherwise, you're in a mess. And to make our job even easier, unhappily, relevance is not forever. You might find the right formula for now. All your data points might be wonderful from now. 5 days from now, something might change. And suddenly, you have to look at those data very hardly and continuously. These numbers might go down in a flash. If your organization, your brain, and your system are not fast enough to react continuously, to have this continuous level of attention, this is not a world where you have once achieved, always achieved. This is a world where you have always to refight your battles constantly every day. So I will end butchering a quote by Theodore Roosevelt. So this is a new world, so, you know, speak softly, but query big data. Thank you.